I'm reading through the article that Tom Epton has written for My Windsock about the Vingegaard time trial that happened on Tuesday. And it's very interesting looking at what it would have taken for Vingegaard to get that time. And the impressive thing is not just that he achieved that time, but the difference that he put into Pogačar, particularly over the final climb. He took out 77 seconds over the course of the climb, which meant that he was riding at 7.6 watts per kilogram for 13 minutes. And what's interesting here is that when we compare his performance to and the performance up the climb, it's something that we can be a little bit more confident about, because we know the profile of the climb and we know the time that he did, and the aerodynamics start to become less and less of a factor. So even if we don't actually have his CDA numbers to hand, then we can still start to eliminate some of those unknowns of the performance. So these sort of calculations will be pretty much spot on. So 7.6 watts per kilogram for 13 minutes, and you can see how that relates to other performances this year, courtesy of Lantern Rouge, who've plotted this graph. So as time goes on to the right, you can see that the watts per kilogram that are achievable by riders drops, and Vingegaard's performance is almost equaling that of the previous best 6-minute climb. So that's very interesting. So these are the general modelling assumptions that we've made. So Tom has calculated 390 watts weighted power with an overall aerodynamics of 0.195 CDA, which is particularly low when we consider that there is some climbing, particularly at the end, that would have been out of the time trial position. If that was a straight time trial performance with no position changes, then that would be a pretty good CDA. So to have these other elements of the performance which would have pulled him out of those positions, being optimal in those positions, then again it shows just how aero Vingegaard was. So the conditions were in his favour, but obviously it's relative to Pogačar, which essentially they would have had the same conditions. There was only 2 minutes between their start times. To demonstrate how the day improved, we modelled Wout van Aert's start time. All credit to Tom. He, using My Windsock, managed to predict Wout van Aert's time within 3 seconds, using previous data that we have for Wout van Aert. So if we look at how Wout's time would have changed from 3:30 in the afternoon to leaving at 5 o'clock when Pogačar and Vingegaard went, then there is a drop of about, 11 seconds in time. So Vingegaard and Pogačar, they had probably the optimal conditions of the day. So then we look at the settings that Tom has put together to achieve the time. So those are the assumptions. So 330 watts on the flat and ascending at 440 watts, and then through the descents pulling at 250. That's very interesting. So the reason why Tom's taken up the descending from the flat CDA is simply because some of the corners wouldn't have been possible to maintain his position all the way through, and probably would have meant some positional changes, even though he would have been obviously in a position having to not pedal quite as hard downhill to assume an even more tighter tuck. So these are assumptions that we're making. We asked Dan Bigham of Ineos Grenadiers, what we could reasonably expect to be a super optimized rolling resistance and drivetrain system. So these are the numbers that we assumed optimal. So the best of those numbers, and so that's the end of that analysis. I think it'll be really interesting when we do get the full file of Vingegaard's performance. What more we can determine once we get those numbers from what is probably one of the best time trials we've ever seen at the Tour de France.